What's up, bros? Ceej here. Just giving you guys a little heads up before the episode. This was recorded before the new wave of resistance and protests, but we still want to make sure that our voices are heard and that it is known that we support and we encourage our listeners. Follow the Black Lives Matter movement. Visit blacklivesmatter.com to learn how to donate, sign petitions, and protest safely. You can also check out Black Visions Collective, Reclaim the Block, Know Your Rights Camp, Minnesota Freedom Fund, Communities United Against Police Brutality, and the ACLU to learn more about the cause. Defund the police, Black Lives Matter, and enjoy the episode.
When the spawn meets world, when the spawn meets world.
What up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Bro Meets World.
What is Bro Meets World?
Your Boy Meets World fan cast. This is episode 83. I'm Ceej.
I am your boy, Tony Curtis. How are you guys?
I was going to ask you, how are you? I have been editing a lot of our season 1 episodes, and I was just listening to our little intros. And I was like, we used to have like such conversations, and now we just dive on in. So,
Well, I can I speculate as to why?
yeah.
Well, I think, 2020 has been an emotional, wreckage of a year. And I have been looking forward to our conversations as an escapism, as a way to get away from the terrible news that seems to pop up week by week. And also I'm in quarantine. Not much is going on.
Exactly.
I
you know
think
what?
that's part
I
of
will
it.
allow that. That sounds like very much in line of what's going on. It's like if I were to ask you, hey, how are you doing? You're like, oh, the world's on fire. What else is new?
Yes, the world's on fire and I'm still at home.
Okay, so that being said, we do have new news in the Boy Meets World fandom. Danielle
Let's talk about that.
Fishel responded to Trina McGee's claims. Basically, she just notified the public of an apology. Apparently,
Hey, Ceej?
yeah.
Ceej, for those who don't know what you're talking about, can you give them some background info on the Trina McGee scandal in the Boy Meets World verse?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So not too long ago, earlier in this season, we talked about the fact that Trina McGee, who plays Angela in the next season of Boy Meets World fame, and she's also the one who ends up dating Shawn and just becomes a staple of the Boy Meets World lore. She released a statement saying that 3 of the main cast members, which was narrowed down to Ben Savage, Danielle Fishel, and Will Friedle, basically teased her and did several either racist comments or microaggressions while she was filming. And it was this whole situation about the production of Boy Meets World and even the reboot Girl Meets World and her treatment there. And Danielle Fishel recently commented on it, saying that she called Trina McGee and basically apologized, and it was accepted, and Trina McGee backed that claim. So far, that's two out of the 3. We still haven't heard anything from Ben Savage, but
Yeah, which is disappointing.
honestly, I'm not gonna lie. I love this show, but the more I see like the live, I'll say, what are they called? Kind of
Like
panels,
conventions?
the
Yeah, the
conventions,
panels.
all this other stuff. Ben Savage seems like removed from like socializing. Like I don't really know how to say
Totally.
it any other way than everyone else seems to have like this energy and this vibe with each other, and he seems part of it, but like on the edges. Like he's there, but like not really in.
I have noticed this as well, and it's part of the reason why I often get a little disappointed and sometimes bored when I'm watching these panels, because there's so much that, like, I don't know. I can't imagine what it's like to have the most famous thing you did be from 20 years ago, like, and having to talk about it all the time. Like, I can't imagine how annoying that must be. But if you sign up to do a convention or a panel, like, you're going to be with people who are diehard fans, with nerds for your art that you produce in the world. Like, you can get a little bit more excited about it, Ben. Like, he doesn't chime in for questions unless he's directly asked. He just seems, like you said, removed, detached. I don't know if it's an ego thing, but it comes across more like laziness.
Honestly, I don't think it is. I think that, like, it's really funny because when I look at these panels and I see how Daniel Fischel and Will Friedle interact with Ben Savage themselves, it just seems like that's him. Like, I think there was like a whole story. They were all like telling stories back and forth about what they used to do, and Ben Savage was like thinking about Raisin Bran. Like he was like, that's just who he is. He's just like he is that celery poster on the wall that he becomes famous for. And that's again, that's nothing against him, but that's who he is and that's his personality.
I wonder if he is just, naturally when the cameras are off, not very expressive or, kind of shy.
Yeah,
I
that's a lot
wonder
of
if
people.
that plays into him not reaching out to Trina McGee for anything. But I have to say, like, all of this is super disappointing as a Boy Meets World fan. Like, to hear that, the one black cast member that had any, longevity on the show was ostracized, was, whether it be microaggressions or anything more, overt, experienced racism on the show that played such a huge part in my childhood. It's disappointing to hear, and I'm glad that they're working it out now. And I'm glad that much like a lot of people in 2020, they're reflecting and having these hard conversations. But it's also like, dude, like she was on Girl Meets World. Like this was recently. Like it wasn't like it was from the 90s.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I mean, we talked about it when we did our episode "I Ain't Your Aunt Jemima," which basically talked about this in full. But um, when I really do think about the way that they wrote her character, even like the idea of her character needing to come to Shawn for approval to get married, is like so backwards from what we see or what we will see with their dynamic in general, let alone any black woman you would know, in person. It's just it was a very weird and weirdly handled situation. And I think that as with all things we are revisiting, we can only hope to do better.
It's funny. Our production company that we have for our podcast is called Two Free Tokens, and based on the fact that we're often the token black people in a group of white faces. And I have to, reflect on our experiences that we had with all white friends and how much accidental racism slipped out when you were just around a group of white people whose privileges weren't being checked.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't imagine that on a Hollywood level when people have more of a freedom with fame to maybe be a little bit more outspoken. Um, what that was like for her on set when you're not only surrounded by all white faces, but these are white faces that are constantly getting adoration, constantly getting attention and accolades. What it must have been like for her, regardless again of how overt the racism was.
Absolutely, and we also talked about the fact that they were actual children when I believe she was a little bit older when she started to play the Angela character. So there is that like age gap.
Yeah.
That again is never an excuse, but definitely a explanation.
There was a huge age gap between on Saved by the Bell between Screech and the rest of the cast, and
Hmm.
there was also a lot of like relationship issues between Screech and the rest of the cast because he didn't feel like he was seen as a peer, because he was seen as something different, because he wasn't in their age group. And I just wonder if that's just a thing that happens on shows sometimes, that there are just certain age groups that just kind of click up. And when you have a show like Boy Meets World where the central cast is clicked up, how that could make guest stars or people who are not the main cast feel when they're on that set, on that environment where they're not feeling supported.
So you just made me think, and I do wonder what Lark Voorhees, like, what was her experience like,
Yeah.
being like the only black person? I mean, she did have AC Slater to be with her in the cast, but Mario Lopez has shown himself to be a little bit of a situation himself. So I don't think we were exactly riding with him the whole way.
I do not want to talk about Mario Lopez because if I get started, it's all I'm going to talk about.
Okay, well, before we detour too far, get it? Get my segue? Detour driving.
I like it. I like it.
We will introduce this week's episode, which is season 4, episode 14, Wheels.
Ooh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
You want to do your tell me about it little
Oh,
song?
of course, yeah. As everyone knows, I try to incorporate Billy Joel's "Tell Me About It" to use to sum up the episode. Here we go. Tell me about it. Tell me all about the show. Cory gets stopped by cops. Surprisingly, he is not shot.
Thank you. And this is exactly what I wanted to talk about because when we were talking about detours, I was like, the way this show and this episode handles the police is very much about privilege, and so I'm really excited to get into it.
Totally. Yeah, let's get into that. Tell me about it.
Yeah, this is season 4, episode 14, Wheels. Alan finds himself at a crossroads when Cory, armed with a new driver's license on his 16th birthday, would rather celebrate the event on a road trip with Shawn and Topanga instead of with his father. Meanwhile, on their road trip, Cory gets stopped by the police and goes to trial while his dad watches videos of Cory when Cory was a little kid.
I'm gonna go out on the limb before I even begin this episode diving into it and just say I like this episode. I have so many problems with every part of
it. I agree with you. I was like, this was another one of the memorable episodes that we always talk about. I'm also laughing because I mentioned earlier that I'm editing these episodes, and I don't know how many times we said the words, "This is when it really begins, Boy Meets World."
Yeah.
But like this is just like definitely one of those more iconic episodes, and I rewatching it, I was like, oh, I have a lot of problems with what's going on. So let's just get into it. First thoughts.
First thought is that someone saying I want to drive 2 hours to see a movie is immediately a lie to me. There's no excuse. This is about 16-year-olds going to see an R-rated Van Damme movie. Can 16-year-olds even get into an R-rated movie?
No, which is what Alan was like talking about. He's like, you can't even get in. You have to be 17 or older. But they were just going to sneak into the movie because they're that old now. They can just sneak in.
In all fairness, I used to sneak into R-rated movies all the time. Hey, kids, listen up. This is the easiest way to do it. When you want to go see Van Damme rips out throat of Asian man playing in Auditorium 3, you actually get tickets to, let's say, Little Women playing in Auditorium 2 that starts half an hour beforehand. You sneak right in. It works every time.
So what's really funny is you know me, I was very much like a Cory in the sense of like I was too much of a goody-goody, and I was like, we'll always get caught. And I had several friends constantly try to get me to sneak into theaters, but I just was so obvious about it that we would always get caught because I would be like, can we do this? Like, are they going to catch us? And they were like, what's this giant big kid doing?
Sometimes it backfires. Sometimes, like, our local movie theater got hip to it and started putting like little cops outside of the R-rated movies to check your tickets, and I got stuck watching Jackie Chan's The Tuxedo, which is maybe the worst movie I've ever seen in my life.
Say, notoriously one of the worst movies, so that was definitely a punishment in itself.
That was a punishment. I learned my lesson. So.
Also, this is like completely me being a little geeky, but while watching the episode, I was like, what Van Damme movie could they be going to see? On my research, considering the fact that this episode came out in January of 97, the newest R-rated Van Damme movie was Maximum Risk, which came out in September of 1996. So
I'm embarrassed to say that I am a little too familiar with Jean-Claude Van Damme's filmography, and I don't recognize that title whatsoever.
So I have no idea what it's about. It is not rated high, but if you want to see the movie that Cory was really willing to risk jail time for, it is Maximum Risk.
Yo, what did you think about Topanga like being down to do it because she gets to see Van Damme with his shirt off?
I feel like, again, we're dealing with this point of time in Topanga where she's half teenage girl and I allow her that freedom. And then other times it's just like the writers are just writing what they think a teenage girl would do. But I do feel like that's kind of true to Topanga, especially like a little bit later in the episode when she's like, look, the responsible part of me doesn't think that we should be doing this, but the other part of me really wants to go. Thank you for listening to me. Just thank you for helping me process this.
No, I actually think Topanga's pretty. I like her in this episode overall. My main issue is Alan in this episode.
Yes. Well, to be fair, it's Alan and Cory, but Alan should know better. Because
Alan is a birthday ruiner. He ruined Eric's 18th birthday. He's ruined Cory's 16th birthday by some like the reason Alan gets so mad at Cory is ridiculous to me because Alan is furious that Cory goes to get his license with Shawn and Topanga on his birthday, even though Alan never said, "Hey Cory, I really want to go with you and go get breakfast." That's what I did with Eric. The problem is that we saw It's a Wonderful Night, the episode where Eric gets his license. And he
yep,
goes on his birthday with Jason.
yep.
Of course, he fails, and of course, he has a whole situation that follows. But if Alan did go with Eric to get his license, he did not go on Eric's birthday, and he did not make Eric feel any pressure to have breakfast with him and go with him. So this whole episode just felt like a real, like, wait, what?
Yeah, well, also, it's the idea of communication. Most of this is communication and just male stubbornness. And the idea that he would have all of these plans for a 16-year-old without, like, they had a dinner planned and didn't tell Cory. And it's like, I don't know a lot of things, but I do know that teenagers have plans and they have friends. And why does his friends not know about this dinner that's coming on tonight? You know what I mean? It's like, they made
Yeah.
all of these plans and they didn't really even run it by. And I love that Amy was like, "Does Cory know anything about this?" Because it's a perfect example of, in general, I hate surprises because you don't know what I have planned. And I feel like Cory is justified in his anger about the situation, even though he's not justified with his actions.
I thought Alan was kind of a little bitch
He
throughout the
was.
whole episode. I was totally on Cory's side for the first half of it. And, once we get to like the actual car cop scenario, that's where the episode kind of takes a turn for me. But throughout the first half of it, I just couldn't stop feeling like Alan was just ruining his son's birthday for his own reasons. And obviously, the show makes it seem sentimental that Alan just misses his little boy, but if he misses his little boy, he would make sure he had a better birthday.
Absolutely. Well, I think what's important to notice is this is a habit of Alan's. As you pointed out, it's the same thing with Kid Gloves episode, where he gives Cory this gift that he doesn't like. Alan has all of these grand ideas in his head, but he doesn't really communicate them to anyone. He just kind of does things and expects people to fall in line. And that's not how anything should happen. Like, if you're doing that, you are setting yourself up for disappointment and you're setting other people up to like feel embarrassed or feel like they haven't lived up to some ideal that they had no agreement to.
I want to quickly mention this because you brought up Kid Gloves, the episode in season one where Alan gives Cory his boxing gloves that he won in the Navy for, I guess the silver gloves. There's a point where Cory's trying to find ways for Morgan to relate to Alan, and Morgan's like boxing and gives him a mean hook, like left
Yeah.
hook right to the face. And I'm like, Cory, that's your in. Like she can box. Alan's a boxer. Like make this happen. What's really funny too is that Morgan calls the boxing gloves boxing mittens, which is also how Cory referred to them when he got the silver gloves from his dad in that season one episode.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. I didn't think about that, but why not? Like, again, I think it's this narrow mindedness of Cory trying to make Morgan into a boy instead of just looking at the talents that she's already showing and being like, hey, you and dad have this in common. Why don't you bond over it? And I think that what the episode does is it shows us that Alan is this way because Cory's his youngest son and Morgan's his first daughter instead of his third son. And Alan just basically is having a midlife crisis again because Cory's getting older and he will get a chance to do all of these things. But very much like we say in any other episode or with any other situation, you can't put those feelings and that feeling of inadequacy on anyone else. Like your behavior towards everyone else in that situation is uncalled for. That is a personal gripe, and you don't get a pass because your son is getting older.
It's so interesting how this show, this specific episode, plays with like gender bias in parenting, which I think is something that you were kind of touching on, like how Alan's feeling about his last son versus, the fact that Cory's a middle child, and just this idea of like, well, Morgan's around, but she's just a girl. It just feels kind of dismissive and kind of shitty to just feel like, well, I mean, Morgan's a girl, so there's no chance that he can have a relationship with his daughter. I mean, why would any man have a relationship with his daughter? Like, it's ridiculous, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, even when it comes to the fact that he was like, "Hey, Morgan, do you want me to go do your hair?" And she's like, "Are you kidding me?" And he's like, "You're right." But it's like, why did you try to do something that you would never done, i.e., her hair? Why not ask what her interests are or do whatever Morgan would want to do, but not impose yourself in the situation that you don't belong?
One of my least favorite traits of early 90s movies and kid-based movies and television shows was this idea that like parents hated doing what kids wanted to do. Like it was like annoying to like take a kid to do something like a show or that he wants to go to, or to a circus or a play, like anything like that. Like it always seemed like a frustration or a burden to parents to uh, find to invest in what the kid's interested in versus the parent like trying to bring the kid in what they're interested in, like, oh, come hear this band that I used to listen to in the 60s, or come watch this sports game that was really important to me. Like it's something I've noticed among many television shows and movies in the 90s, and I wish I had more examples to give. The one I'm kind of thinking of is Getting Even with Dad with Macaulay Culkin and
That's
Ted
exactly what
Danson.
I was thinking of.
But just this idea that just like, wow, like why not just do something that the kid's interested in to relate to them and build a relationship that way versus it being the other way around. I don't know what was it about that generation of parenting in the 90s that felt like the only way to get a kid in is to pull them into your realm of interest.
Well, so a little context, what we're dealing with in the 90s is this first real generation of dads who are separated from their children. Like it's kind of like a norm now that all these dads are divorced, and like we see it a lot in the Santa Claus and a lot of these movies where like it used to be like the the twist was and dad takes care of the kids, but now it's like and dad takes care of the kids while having his own job, and dad has to experience what it's like to be a single parent for the first time. So that's really what we were dealing with. We were dealing with all of these, I'll say, Hollywood execs who were telling stories about, hey, did you know that bonding with your kid is harder than it seemed? And here are a few ways. So
That's super interesting how you're talking, how you made the connection between just like the family shift that took place in the 80s and 90s of increasing divorce and different kinds of households, whether it be that the dad is divorced or the fact that the mother would be working, leaving more responsibilities to parenting to fall on the dad, like how that made its way into our art that we consumed. Fascinating, bro.
yeah, well, you get a lot of movies at that time that are just about dads learning to value their families.
To not
Uh,
be shitty dads, that's the
yeah,
whole plot.
exactly. That's really it, and a lot of them fail at it. But the whole arc is supposed to be, this big businessman has to take care of his kids for a weekend. What's he gonna do with them? Um, so yeah, I
Did
think
you ever
that
see Mr. Mom with Michael Keaton?
I never saw Mr. Mom, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Maybe we'll do that for movie makeover because that's some exactly what the hell we're talking about. Like the whole premise is like, hey, you have to do what your wife has been successfully doing for years.
Exactly. Well, there's like you get Getting Even with Dad. There's the one where it was like Chevy Chase and JTT.
Yes,
Um
man of the house.
yes, thank you. There's one where it's
Rest in peace, Farrah Fawcett.
Ted Danson and Macaulay Culkin, I believe. Like I don't know, like look at it. Anyone who's listening to us right now, go and look up. There's just a slew of kids movies where the whole premise of the movie is kid is with dad for the weekend, or for however many weeks because mom is out of the picture. So anyway, getting back to our episode, I think that what we're trying to say is every character in here is responsible for their own feelings and behavior, and acting out does not excuse you. Um, I think Alan's behavior is, like I said, it's shown a pattern throughout the many episodes that we've seen of him just kind of assuming that everyone will fall in line and getting upset when they don't. And I think that that's something that modern television would explore or at least call out.
Totally, totally.
Um, let's talk about Cory in this episode and his kind of assumptions because we open up with Cory being like, "Of course, my dad's going to give me the car. Why would he not?" You know what I mean?
I think that Cory, again, he is treating his relationship with his dad like it's continuously always been. Like, I've had a driver's permit and dad's let me take the car and he hasn't made a big deal about it. And so I don't see why he wouldn't do this for me for my birthday. Like, I am in your court, Cory. Why wouldn't he give you the car? It's your birthday. Like, go to the damn movies.
Oh, I will say that we kind of skipped over this, but when Alan finds out that Cory has already gotten his license and he throws his little hissy fit and Cory's like, "Well, can I have the keys?" The moment Alan's like, "Well, actually I have some." Well, no, what he says first is, "Sure, I wouldn't mind being driven around." And Cory's like, "That's not what I meant." And then he gets really upset and he's like, "Well, I have some things I need to do. So let me be gone for a few hours and then get back to you." And again, at this point in time, he also hasn't mentioned the dinner.
Now, did Corey say that he waited for like 5 hours for Alan to come home? Like, Alan literally had the day off on his son's birthday and was like, I'm going to decide to use this time to run errands that require the car.
Exactly. That's so petty. It's so petty. So petty and childish.
Oh my God. I will have to say that again, like Corey's initial motivation of just like, hey, I want to drive to Atlantic City to go to the movies feels like a lie to me. One, because I'm from Atlantic City. I was born there. I have family there. I know what Atlantic City has to offer. People do not go there for movies. Um, Also, again, this is getting real into the depths of it, but being from Atlantic City, I know that the drive to Philly is an hour and a half on the Atlantic City Expressway. Unless this dude was trying to avoid tolls, there ain't no reason for him to be on a back road. I don't know where this mysterious country town is in New Jersey, but again, there's several highways that will get you to Atlantic City very quickly.
Yeah, I looked it up and I was like, it's an hour and a half drive. Where was Corey going? But maybe he was going too slow for the highway because we saw how slow he was getting.
Him driving like an old man doesn't surprise me at all. Like
Not at
that
all.
feels right in line with Corey's character.
Very much so.
So he gets a ticket. Do
Well,
we want
before
to
we go
talk?
there, I want to talk about the dinner and just
Okay.
Corey and Alan's tension in this episode because I think you're right. There is Corey is rightfully upset, but just the way that he talks to for me, it's hard because I remember what I was like when I was 16, and there were plenty of yelling in conversations because it just feels like an injustice, and so you are angry and you are loud, but it also does kind of seem like he's putting in zero effort even at his dinner. Like they're already talking about, can we go? And like it's like how hard would it be to have some cake, put on a smile, and then ask for the keys?
Also, when I'm a teenager, I don't know about you. If someone else is paying for my dinner, I'm there.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, he didn't know about the cake again.
He didn't know about his second clown burger. He got two clown burgers, bro. Like it's a good day.
Exactly. There was just such opportunity for it to be a good day. And I feel like Corey kind of aided to it with his attitude, but also like as a teenager being 16 to have like your entire day ruined by your dad who is just being petty and childish, I can imagine tensions would remain high.
I really like episodes when there's tension between Alan and his children. I feel like it's far too television fantasy like for there to be this like completely cohesive relationship between the parents and the kids, especially the fathers and the kids. Like I feel like every person I know or talk to, even people who have great relationships with their fathers, are like, yeah, me and my dad have gotten into it a few times. And it's fatherly tension is just, I feel like, a very American thing. Again, I don't know whether it's because of the generational gaps where there's not a lot of emotion expression, but for example, like me and my fiance have been trying to do our family trees recently.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been reaching out to our parents to talk about it. Our dads don't know anything about the family history and they don't want to talk about it. It's like they just do not want to like express things like that. And I think that's just was taught to them about like, hey, you just work hard and you focus on that and you don't worry about the past and emotions and feelings. And so again, I feel like it's a very realistic thing for there to be tension between Alan and his kids, because it's more of a reflection of teenage life, I feel. And even though I don't agree that like this was the best conflict for them to have, because Alan is painted to be a little bitch, I do enjoy that there is some more realism between their characters as father and son.
Yeah, I completely agree. What do you think about like the other characters in this episode, such as Alan, Amy, Eric, and Topanga?
I love Amy.
I love Amy. Don't get me wrong. I always love Amy, and she usually is the most reasonable person in the room. But I was just kind of upset that she didn't have more of like she's taking this approach of like seeing the tension and seeing what's going on, but not really participating. And maybe that's just my habit of like wanting to get involved and solve things. But Amy's really kind of like taking a step back and she's just watching it.
I don't know, dude. Okay, here's why I am kind of cool with that, because I am thinking about this from like a parenting thing. Like I'm co-parenting, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you and your boyfriend have a kid, you guys are going to be co-parenting together. And so you would want to make sure that you're constantly on the same page when it comes to your kids. I always thought that like with my life partner that I have kids with, like I would want to make sure that like we don't talk down to each other when we're around the kids. We don't go against each other. Like I always want to be like a united front with the kids. So the idea that Amy's like, you know what, I'm going to wait and talk to him about this later, I kind of respect that. Do I wish that she had a little bit more agency in the relationship where it didn't feel like she was as a parent like checking in on him, but more as a partner like saying, hey, I have a 50% say and I feel this way? Of course. But I do respect the fact that she didn't undermine her partner in front of their kids.
Yeah, I guess we're practicing that with the puppy right now, and let's just say it has not always gone off as easily. There have been
Yeah.
lots of times, but you're right. There are moments where I'm like, this isn't what we agreed upon, or this isn't what I would prefer. But because the most important thing to do right now is to get control of the situation. I'll just be quiet and see where things go. So I guess I can see that. I was just like, I always want more of Amy, and she was just again the supportive spouse instead of like a real like force in the episode.
Totally. Totally. I think that Shawn and Topanga are used perfectly in this episode. I think they're in it for just the amount of the right time. I think they bring the right energy to it. Like, Shawn and Topanga are kind of always the angel and devil on Cory's shoulder. And I feel like, even in this situation where Topanga is the wiser one, she admits that she has immature tendencies. So when they are on the highway going towards Atlantic City and they get pulled over, it's not like, uh, it, I, it's not unexpected that they would run into error.
I love what you were saying because the narrative of Sean and Topanga always being the devil and angel on Corey's shoulder, that's so it. Like, you're right. It's like Sean's always like, what? Why don't you have the keys? Why aren't we going on this road trip? Like he's always like pushing, pushing, pushing. And Topanga really does kind of take a step back and she's like, hey, I want to be there as well. But like, let's try to be responsible in what we're doing. She's the one who says during the dinner, "Can't we at least pretend to be having a good time?"
Yeah, and she's also the first one that's like, hey, maybe you should call your dad.
Yeah, exactly. And also, but I think it's great that they're there and they're letting Corey solve his own issues because they understand that this isn't something they can force him to do. This is just kind of like watching your friend, yell at their parents, and you're like, this has nothing to do with me. I wouldn't do it, not in my house, but you know.
For it being such an awkward day, like the fact that Shawn and Topanga were like, "Hey, it's still your birthday. Like we're still here with you. Whatever you want to do, we're down for." I thought that was cool. I don't know how much Eric really played in the episode. I don't really remember him much, except for him singing "Happy Birthday" when he was bringing out the car cake.
Well, he's the one who gives Cory some context into what's going on. Of course, he does so in a very teasing way when he's like, Dad liked me better. And so, like I had an easier time. But he is kind of there as the brotherly support during this episode.
And yeah, because he's the one who says the reason why Dad's upset is because you're his second, Morgan's his third daughter, not his third son.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he does kind of school him a little bit. Yeah, so he acts as the older brother who gives him insight. Everyone fulfills their roles pretty well there, as far as like Eric, Shawn, and Topanga go.
Yeah, and now we can talk about the part where Cory gets pulled over going 1 mile over the speed limit because it's a speed trap. And I thought that this was very interesting considering everything we're talking about with defund the police and abolish the police and basically just the entire system. Because I have so many questions here.
Yeah.
But
What
before we
cop pulls you into a courthouse at night for an immediate trial based on the opinion of one judge? That
exactly.
seems like some unconstitutional bullshit.
Thank you. But while we're doing that, I want to do our roll call where we can
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about the individuals. So we get Dan Loria, who is Judge Lamb.
Fucking love him.
He
in
also
everything.
played the dad in The Wonder Years, which stars Ben Savage's brother,
Fred Savage.
Fred. I was like, it's not Ed Savage. I was like, what
Ed
is
Savage, yeah. No, Ed Savage hasn't had an acting career. He's the other Savage brother.
But yeah,
But no, Fred Savage stars in The Wonder Years, and Dan Loria is his dad on that show. And I always kind of consider The Wonder Years the prequel show for Boy Meets World.
very much
so
so.
for him being there and also being a father figure, even in this role as a judge, I thought was very fitting for him.
Absolutely. And then Raymond O'Connor plays Officer Dibble.
No thoughts on him.
He's a stock character, so
Yes.
but he is the one who's constantly. I will say the thing with Officer Dibble is he's always like, it's a speech. What part are you not getting? And I think that at least for me, that was very transparent. Of like, dude, this is made to trip you up. And there's like, throw all your logic out of the window because the question is, did you break the law? Yes or no? And for all of you people who argue, if you don't want to do the crime, don't do. Sorry, if you don't want to do the time, don't do the crime. This is the bullshit that people of color put up with all the time.
I wrote that the cops treat Cory like a black kid in the sense that he gets pulled over for going 1 mile above the speed limit, is immediately sentenced to see a judge, and he doesn't get a lawyer to represent him. I was just like, wow, I can't believe they're treating Cory so black in this episode.
Yeah, I love it. Like he doesn't like. Not only that, what I thought was really interesting is this system of him not being able to even get like they're like, hey, we can pay the bail if you can tell me where the nearest ATM is. It's like there is no ATM. We don't accept credit cards. It has to be cash and it has to be now. I was like, this is a messed up system that is specifically made in Jersey to put people in prison. You know what I mean?
Yeah, New Jersey, get your shit together.
Yeah, I was like,
we know you're out there on those streets pulling over those innocent white kids for driving 1 mile over, and we've had enough. Oh my goodness. Okay, I do have to say, as much as I had an issue with the whole concept of a speed trap, while watching the episode, I was like, this is such a dumb thing to like get these kids into a court setting. Like, I just felt like a stupid excuse. I love how it's used in the story to demonstrate how childhood is a speed trap. And for Alan, Dan Loria says something to Alan after he gets called. And I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but
You're fine.
the whole concept of just like, these kids grow up so fast, it's a speed trap, helped bring the episode around and helped me appreciate the use of that tool to tell this story more than I did when I was first introduced to it.
Absolutely, I agree. That was one of the things that I pulled. This idea that Judge Lamb is telling not only Alan, who is really important to get, considering that Alan is pining over his son growing up, but also to Cory. He's like, "Look, I know that when you're 16 and you have a license, those 2 years seem like forever, but you just don't know how fast they go by." And Alan, the exact same thing. He's like, "You need to understand that." He's under your roof for 2 more years and you'll blink and that'll be gone. So you guys need to really put this tension aside because your time together as a family unit is coming to an end.
For Dan Lauria to be the one who says to Alan, like, "Hey, before you know it, your kids are going to be gone." There's this kind of understanding between him and Alan where even though he hasn't come out and said like I also have kids who have grown up too fast, it's this understanding that that's something that's implied anyway. Did you get that too? That Dan
Yeah,
Lauria had kids that grow up too
I
fast?
think he does say he was a kid. Or sorry, he has kids. I may be wrong, but I thought I remembered him saying that. And yeah, this was definitely a man speaking from experience.
The reason why I found that so interesting is because the Wonder Years ends when Kevin graduates high school.
Ah,
So like it's kind of like this thing of just like, yeah, we know that you've had kids that have grown up too fast. We saw it like 3 years ago on TV. And so I don't know. I thought that was kind of I don't know if that was what they were trying to imply, but having him there and also having all of this home footage of Fred Savage, Ben Savage.
yeah, Ben.
Um,
See, it's not as easy, is
it's not easy.
it?
But there's all this home footage of Ben Savage, and in the background, I think I see Fred Savage in there. It felt like a very Fred Savage cameo-ish episode, even though he wasn't there.
Yeah, I think what you're hinting at is something that I didn't realize until you pointed out that he was the father from Wonder Years, but it's kind of like a handing over of the baton,
Yes.
or the gavel, I guess in this case, of
Ooh.
like, of like, hey, as one TV father to another TV father, like all of this goes by as quickly, like before you know it, all of it's gone. So just really cherish it. And there's more I want to talk about with Judge Lamb, but I really thought that was positive.
Was Feeney in this episode?
Yes, he was. Remember, he has a conversation with Alan about why he never had kids.
Yes, and that's why Alan should be appreciative of his situation because at least he has kids, is what Feeney's lesson was to him.
What I thought was interesting about that is Feeney specifically says it was a choice not to have kids. So that's I don't know why, but you don't always get that. Sometimes you hear about these couples who have been married for a while and they couldn't or whatever may
Yo.
life went by, they forgot to have kids, but Feeney
Yeah.
was like, no, I absolutely chose not to have kids because I couldn't handle the responsibility. And I think that says a lot because Alan's like, your life is kids. He's like, no, my job is kids.
Job, yeah. Yo, how interested would you be in a prequel Feeney show? Like
We've
about
talked
Feeney
about this.
like being married, him like being a teacher in his early years, figuring it out. Like, would you be down for that?
Who would not? But like, name one person who wouldn't want a Feeney Meets World like television show.
Oh
Like,
my god.
come on.
Feeney meets World. Disney Plus, are you hearing us?
I mean, because think about it, like, especially in the whole idea of Feeney being young at like during the 60s and 70s and watching him grow to learn all of these life lessons he will eventually hand off. I think it's great.
Wow. Wow. I don't really have much else to say about this episode. I mean, like I said, there are some conflicts like that Alan brings up that I don't feel like are supernatural, but for the most part, not supernatural like which is not super space natural for his character. But for the most part, like I do like this episode. Like when the episode ends, I'm like, you know what, Michael Jacobs, I'm in it. You got me. I still am a fan, despite the fact that I had issues with most of the episode.
Well, I have a problem with Judge Lamb, and I don't have a problem with him per se, but I have a problem with the legal system that we get with Judge Lamb. We kind of hinted on it with the fact that he goes directly to court. They're like, if you can't pay the fine, you have to see someone. Um, the way that he is kind of like mean and overbearing to Cory, but also like toying with him with the balloons.
The
Like as
balloon thing, bro. What the hell was that?
yeah, yeah. But again, it's this dynamic of this. It's a power play, and I like that Shawn, being who he is, comes. He goes, "Let me tell you, anyone who will make you a balloon animal in the middle of a case will absolutely send you away." You know what I mean? Like it's like this guy may seem all cuddly, but I think he's mad serious in abusing the law. If I'm going to be honest, and the for me, the idea of him even talking to Alan, saying that Cory, you're lucky you have this family dynamic that is different from all of these other kids that are in front of me, makes me think who else are is in front of Judge Lamb, and does he have the same leniency and understanding as he does with Cory in this case?
Totally. It's so interesting that you interpreted the balloon animals as him being like kind of kooky, because I thought of it as them literally soft pedaling the legal system. Like, in no reality would a black kid be taken to a judge who makes them balloon animals. It just felt like they were whitewashing the legal system and what people actually have to go through when they have really um toxic, interactions with police officers who pull them over.
Well, so what I'm actually responding to is the fact that I feel like it's specifically different for Cory. Like the way that he's talking to Cory makes me
Yeah.
feel that if this was a black kid in front of him, it wouldn't be the same. Like if we take Carlton and Will and put them in front of
Yes.
him instead, and it's Uncle Phil who shows up, I feel like it would have been more of an issue instead of what we get, which is this compassionate, I understand what's going on here, especially when he's like, hey, I want you to take this quarter and call your dad. And Cory's like, no, I don't think so. I don't think I'm wrong. And it's like, you just basically told a judge, I'd rather go to jail than call my father. And
Yeah.
the judge responded with sympathy instead of what I feel like a judge like Judge Lamb would do, which is really see it as entitlement. And I don't know. Do you get where I'm going with this?
Totally. And I love that you brought up the Carlton and Will thing, because I literally just watched that episode from season 1 of Fresh Prince where Carlton and Will get pulled over for going too slow under the speed limit. And what happens to them, where they actually have to have Uncle Phil, a lawyer, come and threaten the police station in order to let these guys go, compared to uh, Ben Savage and Corey Matthews, who are also from Philadelphia, having a
Mm-hmm.
very different interaction with the police department for going over. Like, they broke the law. Carlton and Will didn't. And yet they both had different experiences. Again, different TV shows, but I think it's also a reflection of what the justice and legal system's like for white kids in the 90s versus black kids in the 90s, and even now.
And yeah, that's my thing. I guess for me, I saw hinted at a different version of Judge Lamb if this wasn't Cory. And Shawn's commentary of, look, I can tell this who this guy is, and this guy is someone who, if you didn't have the privilege and you didn't have the whiteness behind you, this would probably go very differently.
How do you feel about watching this episode, I don't know, like a month or two after George Floyd? Like, does it change like anything watching this episode, knowing that like we're having such a national conversation about the way cops treat people when they're pulled over, or is this more of like a relic from the past? Like,
No,
it's
I
more of just
think
like, wow, this is a time capsule of that moment.
No, I think looking at anything dealing with officers now is a complete and like I just watched Thelma and Louise for the first time the other day, and halfway through this, I was like, this has to be satire and commentary on the American police system because there's no way none of this makes sense and every reaction is an overreaction.
Yeah.
And I feel like now that we are all talking about it and we're all re-examining what they call propaganda and like our legal system in real life versus our legal system on television, I could not watch this episode and not think about the myriad of ways this would be different if this was a person of color.
Yeah. Yeah. Same.
Okay. All right. So that's pretty much what I have.
Oh,
That,
I have one last thing I want to throw in.
yeah.
And this is just a little tidbit. In the flashback, a home video of a young Ben Savage, it includes some footage of him playing with toy wrestlers. I have mentioned in the past that I feel like this show has like a connection with wrestling through the cast or the showrunners being fans of the sport. And I think seeing a young Ben Savage play with toy wrestlers and then knowing how much wrestling plays a part in the show, I can't help but think that he was kind of geeking out at the idea of being able to work with, Jake the Snake or, later in, I think there's, Mankind makes an appearance later in the seasons. There's just wrestling just keeps coming up, and I think that this little flashback footage was really a cool way to see how Ben's been a fan of that sport for a while.
Speaking of fan of sports, it's funny to me because you reminded me when we were talking about things that Alan would do for Corey's birthday. I was like, why not go to a baseball game? Why would that not be the thing that you did for Corey on his 16th birthday? I just
Can
feel
I can
like
I give you a reason? Corey
go.
hasn't talked about baseball in like 3 seasons. That's why Corey don't give a shit about sports.
Apparently, we don't talk about anything anymore, Alan
Yeah.
and Corey. So, anyway, that all said, do you have a bruh moment or do you have a Feeny lesson?
I guess again Feeney lesson really, I didn't really walk away with one other than just to like cherish your kids while they're young. I don't really know what Corey's lesson would be there, just to kind of show sympathy to his father that's going to lose his son. I don't really know if that's the main lesson. The bruh moment that I just can't get over is just again how a kid was pulled over in the middle of the night, taken immediately into a trial with one judge, to give him a verdict at that moment without a legal guardian or a lawyer present was wild to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the exact same thing for me. Um, my bruh moment would be that, but my lesson, I think, is the whole it's a speed trap thing. The idea of taking your time with all of it. It's like
Yeah,
uh, everything goes by too quickly and you can get caught up. So just take your time and appreciate it for what it is.
sure, sure.
Okay. Um, grade. What grade are you giving this?
I'm giving this a B minus. It's okay.
Yeah, honestly, I think now that you said it, I was going to give it a B, and now I think I'll stick at a B. Like, it's a good story. It has a lot of really big highs. There are a few issues, but we use everyone well, and I just think it's a great, memorable episode.
Sure, sure.
All right. That being said, homework. What you got?
I have been watching Blackish on Hulu recently. I
Really?
don't know how much you watch the series, but when I first got introduced to Blackish, to me it felt like people going out of their way to explain black culture to white people,
Mm-hmm.
which was kind of my first reaction. So I didn't really like get into the show at all. But when Juneteenth happened, I had shown my fiance their Juneteenth episode, which is actually incredibly well done. And
Mm-hmm.
then I saw that they did a video on police brutality, which was also incredibly well done. And so it's made me give the show a second chance, and it's actually not really a bad show. I'm actually liking it quite a bit. I'm liking that this is a show that's tackling the issues that we want shows to tackle, specifically with race issues. The whole thing is about being, the first black family to kind of this main character is the first guy to make it out of the hood, and then two, upward mobility and like, being in the upper middle class or whatever, and just how it feels to have all your kids go to school with white kids, and like, are they losing their culture, and what does that do for you as a black man when you see that, you wanted them to get out of the hood, yet here they are losing the things that you feel are important. So seeing things like that being tackled on a weekly sitcom that's going out nationally on ABC is kind of cool in a way that I wish I would have appreciated the show more from the beginning. But anyways, I've been watching it. It's on Hulu, and I would recommend it for people who want a little bit more social commentary out of their sitcoms.
Absolutely. I think that when I first watched Blackish, it was very much what you were talking about, explaining black issues to white audiences. And I think sometimes they still do that, but what they've really learned to do was bring in these writers of color and start telling stories for people of color and for people who are in that demographic of, hey, now that you're here, let's have that conversation that we've all been having of how should I feel about having a family member who was incarcerated, and should I help them? Should I not?
Yeah.
Like there are all of these dynamics that they
There's a
go.
beautiful episode on colorism within the Black community. Just things that I don't feel like get talked about very often on national television. I'm like, I'm here
Exactly.
for these conversations being happening. So
Yeah, so that's a really good one, and thank you for sharing.
yeah,
For me, my homework this week is it's kind of like a book. It's kind of like a short story. I don't know what it really would be called, but it's called The Burnout Generation by Anne Helen Peterson. This hit BuzzFeed like a while ago, but it just talks about being millennials and the generation of basically go-getters, and we like did everything that we could to keep our head above water, and life just keeps knocking at us.
yeah.
And what that does to your mental psychology, and the burnout that a lot of people experience from just going hard to like reach this end goal that is ever moving. And I thought it was very helpful. It was really great to examine the different ways that it affects different people, the different demographics, and just there's no solutions really offered, because how could you, especially during this time? But it may feel good to be seen, and I thought that was something that could be helpful for everyone. So
That's
again,
that's super interesting. I've been listening. I've been watching all these like piece Vox videos and reading articles about the psychological impacts of millennials and just what we've gone through from 9/11 through the housing crisis through COVID and a myriad of Black people getting shot and killed on national television. Just what it means to be our generation and how the mental effects of being the generation that has produced more for the country than any other generation, yet is getting less than any other
mm-hmm,
generation.
mm-hmm.
I would be fascinated to look into that because that's something that I've been looking into quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Again, it's called the burnout generation, and it's showing like the different ways that you could get burnout. It's like, do you have like laundry that you just can't bring yourself to fold, or like an inbox where you know that all you need to do is check this email, and you just can't
I'm
bring it
feeling
to do
personally attacked, Ceej. I'm feeling personally attacked as I look at my laundry.
it. Exactly, but that's what I thought. And considering our demographic, I figured you all would feel seen by it, or at least get something from it. So anyway, that is our episode.
Good app.
Do you have
Good
anything
app.
else you want to say?
Nothing. I want to encourage everyone out there to, continue to do what they can to be an ally to Black lives. I know that my social media feeds are starting to look a little normal, and I'm still quite pissed off that Black people keep dying. So um, I'm sure that there are other people who feel like me, and there are ways that you can get involved. If you go on our Instagram page, especially, we have a link it's a link tree that has all the links to where our podcasts are, but there's also a swipe up where you can, find different ways that you can give to the Black community right now. I'm going to keep preaching this regardless of, how recently someone has died in the news, because Black Lives Matter all the time.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. Make sure to leave us 5-star ratings. We appreciate. I'm getting a lot of people reach out to us on social media and be like, "How can we help?" or "What can we do?" And until we actually get like a Patreon or anything set up, right now, just giving us 5 stars on iTunes would be helpful, and continue to listen and share. Leave us a rating. As said, you can find us on all of the places, Stitcher, Spotify, Google. We're there. And follow us at Brown Meets World on the social platforms, or email us at brownmeetsworld@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at I am not your Oreo. That is IAMNOTOREO. TC?
Still great fucking name, bro. I'm loving it. I love I'm Not Your You can find me on Instagram at @abraverme, @braver.me. And if you guys have any thoughts about this specific episode, about the tension between Alan and Cory, about Cory's interaction with the police, please reach out to us on all of our social media. You can email us. We'd love to get your thoughts on this specific issue, especially considering how much attention is on police right now and their interactions with people, through traffic stops and stuff. Love to get your thoughts on all that.
Yes, thank you guys. That's pretty much it. I guess we will ask you guys to dream.
to try
and do good.
do some damn good, guys. We need it. We all need some good done.
Later, Russ.
Later, bruh.